Greetings, my fellow freedom low sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning in to L3 Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the wild, wonderful mountain state, and today's date is Monday, June 21st, 2021. First day of summer in the northern hemisphere and winter solstice, to be exact, in the southern part of our planet. Thank you for tuning in, just hanging out. We're under a flash flood watch. So the banks along on my property was up a little bit. A little flooding. But we're okay, so nothing to worry about. Things stopped. Supposed to rain later on tonight, but we will manage. All you gotta do is be more concerned about the snakes that to slither around this time. But we're in good shape. Yeah, so I'll just start to browse around and see what mood I'm in. And I was on my Facebook page for Florida Carry, and this one just came out of the woodworks. It's a column. It's entitled "The Case for Abolishing the ATF" from a Second Amendment Foundation's Investigative Journalism Project, written by Lee Williams. And as the editor's note, this is an opinion column. I alone am responsible for the content. This is what Mr. Williams have to say. No one makes a better case for abolishing the ATF more than the ATF. There has never been a federal agency with such little regard for the sanctity of human life, with such a history of failure, with such antiquated duties and responsibilities, with such propensity to overreact, with such an addiction to good press, with such a willingness to bend over for any politician in charge, and as we are currently seeing playing out, with such little regard for the constitutional rights of American citizens. I'd like to correct that, Mr. Williams, with all due respect. Always use natural rights. Not constitutional. Natural. And I say that with love and in good faith. I have known federal agents from other agencies, the FBI, the U.S. Marshal Service, and the DEA, to name a few. And all of them react the same way whenever the ATF comes up in conversation. Yeah, well, I'm not sure what's up with those guys. Those guys' leadership has been a sick joke. ATF directors who are presidential appointed care about keeping the White House happy than they do the Constitution, the safety of their agents, or the lives of American citizens. Joe Biden's nominee for ATF director, presidential lapdog wannabe David Chipman, will only make things worse if he's confirmed by the Senate. Chipman, a modern-day Czechist, if there ever was one, cut from the same bolt of cloth, such as Iron Felix Dzerzhinsky himself, will transform the ATF into the NKVD for the 21st century, complete with show trials, midnight renditions, and a total disregard for human rights, as long as he gets regular belly rubs from whoever is actually running things behind the Katy barred doors of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. This toxic little imp of a man has always put the Senate and the entire world on notice that he intends to rip America's most popular rifle from American hands, and given his history at Waco, if the hands are cold and dead, it won't bother him at all. How did we get to where we're at now? How did we reach a point in time where only a couple of senators stand between us and a fully politicized and weaponized ATF, which is making ready to unleash hell upon American gun owners? From that, friends, you have to look at the agency's history. Once you do, I'm sure you'll agree that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives should have been abolished decades ago. A history failure, Ruby Ridge. Regardless of what you think of Randy Reaver's politics and personal beliefs, and quite frankly, I don't think much of them, the man was living in a cabin with his family in the middle of the Idaho wilderness near the Canadian border with no electricity or running water and was not a threat to anyone. Unfortunately, some of the folks living off the grid were members of the Aryan nations. Weaver and his wife, Vicky, attended several of their events, but when interviewed by the FBI in 1985, told the agents they were not members and merely attended for social reasons. Anything to get out of the one-room cabin for an evening, I guess. Regardless, the ATF saw Reaver as a potential confidential informant who could infiltrate a terrorist group, so they targeted the Special Forces combat veteran and hoped he would flip and become a confidential informant once they had criminal charges to dangle over his head. The ATF sent their longtime informant, Kenneth Federally, to Reaver's home. Federally claimed he bought 2 sawed-off shotguns from Reaver, although Reaver claimed the barrels were cut off after Federally purchased the guns and Federally's request, which the courts viewed as entrapment. Taking a shot of water here. When the ATF confronted Weaver, he refused to flip, so they filed criminal charges relating to the sale of short-barrel shotguns. Weaver did not receive adequate notice of his court date, which he subsequently missed, so a federal arrest warrant was issued. The case was handed off to the U.S. Marshals, and you know the rest. Reaver's wife Vicky and son Sammy were killed, along with Deputy U.S. Marshal William Deegan. Reaver was charged with 10 federal felonies, including first-degree murder for the death of Deegan. He was acquitted of all charges except for the original bail violation. Reaver was fined $10,000 and served 16 months in prison. He sued the federal government upon his release, later agreed to a settlement of $3.1 million. The ATF's current website includes no mention of Ruby Ridge, Randy Reaver, Lon Hurichi, the FBI sniper who shot and killed Vicky Reaver, or the Deputy U.S. Marshal Deegan was just doing his job trying to bail out the ATF. The siege and killings at Ruby Ridge jump-started the constitutional militia movement, so I understand why ATF now wants to deploy its role in the fiasco. Domestic terrorist Timothy McVeigh cited Ruby Ridge as one of the main reasons he bombed Oklahoma City's Alfred P. Murrah federal building in 1995, which killed 168 people, including 19 children, as have other murderous lunatics who followed in his wake. There's a lot of claims, too, about Oklahoma City, but do your own homework. There's one called the OKC bombing, The Big Lie. You should look that up. Good documentary. A history of failure, Waco. Unlike Ruby Ridge, ATF does acknowledge Waco on its website. According to the agency's Remembering Waco page, the ATF's investigation centered on Koresh and the Davidians being involved in the illegal manufacture and possession of machine guns and the illegal manufacture and possession of destructive devices, including bombs and grenades. ATF's investigation showed that the group acquired 136 firearms, including assault rifles and handguns, 700 plus magazines from those firearms, 200,000 plus rounds of ammunition, 110 and lower receivers for AR-15s, M16 rifles, grenade launcher attachments for AR-15, M16 rifles, 400 plus empty M31 rifle grenades, along with black powder and other explosive chemicals. The ATF points out that the inert rifle grenades could be converted to live grenades. It is not known if any actually were, since all of the evidence was burnt to a crisp. However, None were ever fired in anger. During the highly flawed initial assault, the ATF had to beg for a ceasefire so they could recover the bodies of their dead and wounded agents, during which the Branch Davidian leader David Koresh released 24 members. Imagine that, a ceasefire on American soil. The ATF accepts no responsibility for what happened next during the final assault. A 51-day standoff ended when the Davidian camp erupted in fires set by cult members as law enforcement attempted to force them out by introducing tear gas into the building on April 19th. The fire destroyed the compound and more than 70 residents were killed, many from gunshot wounds apparently inflicted by fellow cult members, the ATF website states. This pure revisionist history, a new low for a federal agency, especially a law enforcement agency. The incident at Waco claimed the lives of 4 ATF agents and more than 70 Branch Davidians. Since this happened on the heels of Ruby Ridge, officials finally began asking questions about ATF's conduct and policies. A subsequent investigation by the Department of Treasury and Justice regarding the actions of law enforcement agents during the siege determined that some statistics and decisions were poorly executed, and certain actions by ATF were criticized, ATF's website states. However, the September 1993 U.S. Department of Treasury Administrative Review concluded the agency is made up of dedicated, committed, and experienced professionals who have greatly demonstrated sound judgment and remarkable courage in enforcing the law. The ATF has a history of success in conducting complex investigations and executing dangerous and challenging law enforcement missions. That fine tradition, together with the line agents' commitment to the truth and their courage and determination, has enabled ATF to provide our country with a safer and more secure nation under law. Talk about Twilight Zone rhetoric. Wow. This, friends, is a classic misdirection. On one hand, the ATF admits it's screwed up big time, but on the other hand, the ATF's saying, look at the bravery of our agents. All right? Sounds like a politician, flip-flopping rhetoric, right? To be clear, I am not now, nor I would ever question the bravery of the agents who had boots on the ground. I question the idiots in charge who were so desperate for good headlines, especially right after Ruby Ridge, that they lost all semblance of reason and pushed the Davidians until there was a bloodbath which everyone, including the president, could see coming. Reaver and Koresh had one thing in common. They both left their compounds regularly, usually unaccompanied. Fair game for a traffic stop by local sheriff deputies, which wouldn't have raised any red flags. If ATF wanted the men arrested so badly, all they had to do is ask the local sheriffs for assistance. The marshals, SOG team, FBI's, HRT, and hundreds of other lawmen could have all stayed home, and scores of lives would have been saved. Unfortunately, the morons who were running this lethal crisis didn't think like that. They were more concerned about how they looked on the nightly news than they were the lives of the Branch Davidians or even their own agents. They cared more about headlines than human lives. They will do. I have to agree. It's funny, I'll be very frank, during that horrific time, I didn't see the whole scenario about what happened. I know some civil libertarians were protesting, and then in due time, I look into it, even in the mainstream garbage news. When I seen the tanks crashing into these compounds, that was a red flag. A big red flag. And of course, then I take the time, but a couple years later, I see the movie Tears of Endangerment. A very good documentary about David Koresh and the compound and all that. And of course, in the end, of course, the extras, the creator of the FLIR project, which is infrared lenses. Even though it was that presentation was a half hour long, and the inventor himself proved on its face, prima facie, members of the ATF were responsible for what happened at the Branch Davidian. I still call it the Waco Massacre. If you ATF agents don't like it, who the hell cares what you think? And all you governmental sympathizers out there. This whole thing was unacceptable as well. And I know a person that knew Randy Reaver and his wife. And interesting claim from this person saying they were contemptuous neighbors, thieves, and Mrs. Reaver wore the pants of the house. So that's just their side. But regardless, they could be pure garbage and degenerates for all we know. The proceedings, what the ATF done, is condemnable. I censor this to the fullest. Okay, just to be fair. All right, history of failure, Fast and Furious. There are real law enforcement agencies that won't let drugs walk during a reverse sting operation. Their rationale is that they don't want drugs posing a threat to the public. I happen to agree with this philosophy. Law enforcement should never put something dangerous into the hands of criminals and then let it walk out the door. However, from 2006 to 2011, the ATF let guns walk. A lot of guns, 2,000 of which only 700 were recovered. A goal of what became known as Operation Fast and Furious was to target Mexican drug cartels. Working with the FFLs, who couldn't refuse to cooperate, the ATF allowed legal straw purchasers in Tucson and Phoenix to buy weapons and then ship them back across the border in the hopes they would lead ATF to the cartel's shot callers. To date, none of these high-level caliber leaders has been arrested. Instead, guns were used by hardcore criminals on both sides of the border. The whole affair would be almost laughable if it were not for the December 2010 murder of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry, who was killed by one of the firearms the ATF allowed to walk. In addition to Terry, more than 150 Mexican civilians were murdered by ATF's guns. This is a national disgrace. In a perfect world, everyone knowledgeable of this operation should have seen inside of a federal prison, much less than relieved of command. But once it became public and Congress got involved, the Obama-Biden administration invoked executive privilege at the behest of then Attorney General Eric Holder, which tied up the proceedings until Democrats took back control of the House and the entire matter was dropped. A heroic Border Patrol agent and 150 civilians have never received any justice. Okay? To all you Biden suckasses out there, this is the man you want as president, right? A globalist, white privilege butt boy. I'm sorry. That's how I feel about white privilege 46. Derision. That's all I gotta say about Biden. Derision. Alright, so, as it says here, for me, the most stunning part of this entire deadly debacle is the complete disregard ATF had the potential victims of the weapons they let walk across the border. A complete lack of concern for the sanctity of human life. After all, they weren't providing guns responsible gun owners. They are arming drug cartels with advanced weaponry that no one in the agency sees upper echelons, even considered or cared that the weapons they gave to the cartels might be used in crimes is simply stunning. Revolting, actually. No one with any street sense, I mean real cops, would have allowed these guns to go across the border. I have no doubt that the victims' race and nationality play the role in the ATF's decision making, too. That's a real tragedy. That alone is reason enough to disband the entire organization. Agent Terry's murder led to the creation of Brian Terry Foundation, which honors his legacy by raising money for the families of fallen U.S. Border Patrol agents and provide educational scholarships for students pursuing a career in law enforcement. I would ask that you please consider them as part of your charitable giving. And there's a link for that, folks, and I do encourage people to check it out. Antiquated duties. Nowadays, I'm worried about the increasing lethality of the Chinese and Russian militaries. I'm concerned about cyber attacks on our infrastructure, loss of my constitutional rights. I hate when he says that. I'm sorry. During the next COVID shutdown and an economy that's starting to look good, starting to look like Jimmy Carter's. And a couple of country gentlemen want to cook up a batch of corn squeezins, or some entrepreneur in New York City untaxed cigarettes for less than $20 a pack. I don't care. I prefer whiskey that's been aged for more than a few hours. I don't ever plan to go to New York City again. Still, even though most of us are completely unconcerned about untaxed liquor or contraband tobacco, they stupidly remain a major part of ATF's regulatory responsibilities. Alcohol and tobacco enforcement, like most of the ATF's duties, could be handled easier by the states or simply ignored. After all, today there are far more pressing concerns. The same can be said for ATF's firearms regulatory duties, especially its enforcement of the National Firearms Act. The NFA was enacted in 1934 in response to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929. It's about relevant today as prohibition, bathtub gin, and flappers. In my opinion, the NFA and the agency that enforce it should both be scrapped. Just take a look of what regulates the NFA. Machine guns, short-barreled rifles and shotguns, suppressors, destructive devices, and any other weapons. Most of them pose a little risk to the public, and those that do are fiercely regulated by other federal laws. I own 2 sound suppressors. One is on my lawnmower. The other is on my truck. If I want one for a firearm, it should be easy to obtain as a replacement for one of my Toros. As to the short-barreled firearms, can anyone show me how a rifle with a barrel less than 16 inches or a shotgun with a barrel more than 18 inches is somehow more dangerous to the public than weapons with longer barrels? And machine guns are the real red herring on the NFA list. There are about 180,000 machine guns legally available for civilian ownership, and you don't need all the fingers on one hand to count the number that have been used to commit a crime. Why, you ask? Because machine guns are incredibly expensive. Price start at around $10,000 on anyone who can afford one, can afford a quality gun safe. As the destructive devices ATF regulates through NFA, hand grenades, bombs, explosive missiles, and poison gas weapons, there are more than enough federal laws and federal agencies to regulate their misuse. The NFA's AOW category regulates disguised weapons such as pen guns, cane guns, and umbrella guns. I will agree that these weapons need federal regulation the moment someone can show me that they're ever been used in a crime where the suspect didn't escape on horseback. The major reason NFA should be scrapped along with the ATF is that the act and the agency that enforces it have become weaponized by the Biden and Harris administration. The president and his elfish nominee now want our ARs and anything with a pistol braced to fall under NFA regulation. That, friends, cannot be allowed to happen. This is the real threat to our liberties, our gun culture, and our way of life. The real threat. There's a word used to describe any new law that instantly turned millions of Americans into federal felons. Tyranny is that, and that is exactly what Chipman wants to do. If he's confirmed, all our ARs and pistols braces will end up regulated by the NFA. The little tyrant and Biden have already promised as much. Sure, it's an easy way you won't comply, but keep in mind, a violation of NFA can result 10 years of imprisonment, massive fines, and loss of your civil rights. I prefer that gun owners never have to make this heady decision. The easiest way to accomplish this is to stop Chipman's nomination cold and then get rid of the ATF. Last week, Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene announced she would soon file a bill that would abolish the ATF. The Georgia Republican legislation will be entitled the Brian A. Terry Memorial Eliminate the ATF Act. While I strongly support any effort to abolish the country's most bloodthirsty federal agency, I doubt the bill will gain much traction in Nancy's home. Pelosi's an old-school gun grabber who I'm reasonably certain wrote the original NFA draft. At the very least, Representative Greene's bill will start a national conversation about the need to get rid of the ATF, and it will also serve us as a reminder that we need to fight for our rights and our rifles right now. Contact your senator immediately. Call each of their offices and tell them you oppose Chipman's nomination. While if you get their staffers on the phone, tell them you want the ATF abolished. If they ask why, tell them the ATF has reached its maximum allowable body count. Tell them it's time to get rid of the ATF before they do any more harm and more innocent people lose their lives. As always, thanks for your time, Lee. And there's a video, Twitter video on this behalf, on the whole Congressman Marjorie Greene, excuse me. And yes, I do support terminating the ATF for a very long time. I'm not going to put this on my footnotes, but I recommend people check out this movie called The Gang about the ATF. You go to jpfo.org and you can look it up yourself under videos for that. Very good documentary. And I believe they have one called the ATF, How the ATF Failed the Test. I recommend folks to get those two videos, buy it, sell it, buy it, and share it, because this is essential. I remember one time, I could give you a funny story. I was at a concert, and fortunately, the place I go, I was like trying to get in, but I had a credit card, and they charged it, and there's one big for nothing knucklehead, big muscle guy, had booze in his hands, walking around the parking lot, And one of the security guys let them know because, it's in the parking lot. Of course, the tenants complained to the club about no booze. And the man had the audacity to say, one with the Broward Sheriff's Office, and I call the ATF on this place. I turn around, I tell them, F the ATF. They're a sham that needs to get dismantled. Yeah, I used the F word. I was very direct. And I walked right in the club. I got to tell you one thing, him and his associates, they were like deer staring at a headlight. They didn't know what to say after that. It was hilarious. I don't want to hear it. Don't, like the other word, don't insult me. That's all I got to say. Don't threaten, use that pathetic rhetoric, arrogant rhetoric, around me, because I will call you out. I don't give a damn who you are or who you know or below. Plain and simple. So yes, I encourage people to check it out. If I'm correct, it was 3960. Marjorie Green filed for the 3960. And I will agree. I'm going to call up my congressman, a clown that he is, Technocratic Ted, and let him know. Get rid of it. And if he calls me back, how can you get rid of it? I go, because I'm more masculine than you. I'm just want to bust some chops. These people to get what they deserve. However, folks, do what's right. Support, be anti-ATF. The ATF needs to be abolished. You can contact your sheriffs, have a 10th Amendment stance on this, and even, like Second Amendment Preservation Acts. It has some good things, but you know what? As long as you got certain language, null and void. And you know what? Then they'll be terminated, just like the 18th Amendment. Repeal them, because they are illegal and invalid with no force. End of story. All right, my friends, that will be it. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share us throughout your social media network. Yeah, first time I did, it's been a while, I did a little over a half hour. But thank you. And if you want to contact me, you can hit me at LokiLuck03@protonmail.com. If you want to donate, you can go to paypal.me or cash.app/LokiLuck3. Hey, I say, if you support the Second Amendment Foundation, that'd be great. Donate to support Lee Williams' work. I'm very pleased to read this. I just totally had to wing it. So Reddit's like, I'll do a show on this one. Has to be addressed. So that's all. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that the demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.